Hey everybody, you know, hidden beneath the surface of the earth are secret places that are shrouded in mystery and history. From ancient cities buried over centuries to secret bunkers and forgotten tunnels. Join me, we're taking a look at the most secret underground places in the world. You know, building underground has always been a popular choice for secret or concealed facilities, as there are a number of advantages that come from it, such as security, stealth, and isolation. Underground spaces provide natural barriers from physical and digital surveillance, making them ideal for sensitive operations. The need for secrecy in certain facilities, from government installations and data centers to private labs and secure bunkers, gives underground developments an advantage. These structures are pretty much invisible to satellites and aerial observation, making them harder to monitor, and they use the Earth itself to provide a layer of natural protection. In modern times, though, underground facilities also provide a measure of digital security that's increasingly important. Modern tech enables some electronic signals to penetrate walls, but underground structures can reduce that signal transmission, offering a bit of a natural shielding. Sensitive data centers built underground benefit from this reduced signal exposure, providing a secure and controlled environment that minimizes electromagnetic interference. So there are very few downsides to building underground. They can be built to do everything that an above-ground building can, without sacrificing comfort or usability. So let's then explore some of these spaces around the world to see just how effective they actually are, from historical sites to modern developments. Now let's head over to Turkey to take a look at the Cappadocia underground cities. Now these are some of the most surprising and impressive ancient sites in the world. Located in central Turkey, Cappadocia is most famous for its unusual landscape, including those fairy chimneys, which are tall, thin spires of volcanic rock. But beneath the surface, there is a vast network of rooms, tunnels, and passageways that were once thriving underground cities. Believed to have first been built by the Hittites around 8th century BC, and then further expanded by other civilizations like the Byzantines, early Christians, and even the Ottoman Turks, the cities acted as refuges and shelters, protecting their residents from invasions, persecutions, and bad weather conditions. The most well-known of them all is the Derinkuyu underground city, which had been completely forgotten about until it was rediscovered in 1963, when a homeowner found a hidden entrance in their basement during renovations. This led to the city at a depth of up to 280 feet or 85 meters and stretching over 18 levels. Although currently only 8 of these levels are open to the public, Derinkuyu is thought to have been home to between 20 and 50,000 people, complete with livestock and even provisions, making it the largest of its kind in Cappadocia. Derinkuyu was well designed, with everything from ventilation shafts to water and waste systems. The ventilation shafts ensured a steady supply of fresh air to the city's lowest levels, while the tunnels, sometimes over a mile long, connected Derinkuyu with other underground cities like Keymakli, which was a similar structure but with narrower tunnels. Heavy circular stone doors were rolled into place to block off entrances to prevent any enemy invasions, which allowed them to be completely self-sufficient over long periods of time. There are churches, chapels, all meaning that normal life could continue no matter what was happening outside. During the Roman and Byzantine periods, they used them to avoid persecution, with the invading armies having no clue that the people were hiding beneath their feet. Let's head to Croatia now and take a look at the Zava Air Base, which is on the border between Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is one of the largest and most secretive Cold War military installations in Europe. It was built by the former Yugoslavia between 1948 and 1968. This base was designed to be an indestructible fortress that was able to withstand nuclear attacks. The facility, also known as Object 505, was a hugely complex project, and it shows just how tense the atmosphere of the Cold War era was, especially in Yugoslavia. The base was carved into the side of a mountain at a cost of more than $3.5 billion to complete. The site includes 5 runways and a vast underground complex that was more than 2.1 miles or 3.5 kilometers long, with facilities spread over endless tunnels. It was built to house over 100 MiG-21 fighter jets, as well as thousands of personnel, all while being able to withstand a 20-kiloton nuclear blast. The entire base was equipped with state-of-the-art facilities to allow it to be self-sufficient, including its own power plant, air conditioning system, water reservoir, and even a hospital. The hangars were designed with automated doors and decoy measures, allowing the MiG-21 fighter jets to be launched almost instantly. This network provided the ability to scramble aircraft without really exposing them to potential airstrikes, which was a critical element during the Cold War. The airbase, though, saw limited active use because it became more of a deterrent than an active combat installation. With the outbreak of the Yugoslav wars in the early 1990s, however, it became a battleground in a different way. And in 1992, Yugoslav forces destroyed the infrastructure to prevent it from being captured by Croatian and Bosnian forces. The detonations during this mission were so powerful that they left massive craters on the runway, and parts of the complex remain hazardous to this day, as there's still unexploded ordnance and mined areas across the site. Let's head over to New York in the United States and City Hall Station. Metro networks involve the creation of miles upon miles of tunnels beneath major cities, and many stations too, but quite often some of these turn out to be far less useful than was originally planned and end up being shut down. The most impressive of any of these around the world is City Hall Station, which is a New York City subway station that's beneath City Hall Park in Lower Manhattan. It was opened in 1904 as part of the subway line to be operated by the Interborough Rapid Transit Company, and it was so grand that it was the jewel in the crown of New York's transit system. Of course, few people who go to New York in modern times have any idea that it's even there, and it's become somewhat of a secret piece of history beneath the streets. The station was designed by the architectural firm Hines and Lafarge, who took elements from the City Beautiful movement, which focused on artistic detail in urban design. They worked with the Spanish architect Rafael Gustavino to create the station's vaulted ceilings, and the rest was truly something special. These ceilings, covered in green and cream-colored tiles, give it a Gothic or Romanesque feel, while brass chandeliers and skylights illuminate the station, allowing natural light to filter down. It was, though, closed to the public in 1945, only 41 years after it opened. The main reason for this was the growing demand for longer subway trains and the station's tight curvature, which was originally designed for smaller trains. Instead of investing in costly renovations, the IRT instead chose to close the station and divert its line through the nearby Brooklyn Bridge station, which could handle longer platforms. While it is closed to regular subway traffic, City Hall Station is still occasionally opened for tours, and passengers on the 6 train can also catch a quick view of the station by staying on the train past the Brooklyn Bridge station, as it makes a loop through City Hall Station to switch directions. Let's fly over to Europe now and take a look at the Erdstall Tunnels. Now, these tunnels are a strange series of narrow, medieval subterranean passages that have been found throughout Europe, particularly in Austria, Bavaria, and parts of Switzerland. They're thought to have been built between the 10th and 12th centuries, and there are no records of who created them, or really why, which has made them one of the biggest archaeological mysteries on the continent. The tunnels are typically cramped with low ceilings and are just usually wide enough for a single person to crawl through. They have small, rounded ceilings and sloping floors, suggesting that they were carefully carved with primitive tools. And they also have a series of uniquely crafted features like small alcoves, schlups, or tight-squeezing holes that connect different sections of a tunnel system. These holes force individuals to crawl, making the tunnels even more difficult to move through and, yeah, a bit claustrophobic. This challenging design has led to some researchers suggesting that Erdstall tunnels were meant to be a defensive shelter. Well, the lack of supplies, ventilation, or clear escape routes within the tunnels, however, means that this is unlikely to have been their main purpose, as they would have been impractical for long-term use. Other suggestions are that the tunnels may have held religious or ritual significance. In medieval European cultures, caves and underground spaces were often associated with spirits or the underworld, and the compact nature of the Erdstall tunnels may have been deliberately designed to create a sense of isolation. Various artifacts have been found here in these tunnels, and it seems to back this up, such as clay pots and small relics, which may have been used in ceremonies. Some folklore even links the tunnels to mythical beings like the Erdmannlein, or Little Earthmen, who are small subterranean creatures that are believed to live in underground spaces. Well, perhaps surprisingly, there's also the suggestion that the tunnels were used for agricultural purposes, possibly as a form of ancient cold storage. While they aren't well ventilated, their underground location could have provided a stable, cool environment, especially at a time before more efficient storage methods were available. The fact that there are so many ideas about what these tunnels were used for shows just how little we really understand them and the people who dug them. New Erdstall tunnels are found all the time, so we're not even sure how large the network is. It will only be by further study that the truth will hopefully one day be revealed. Moving up to Scotland, the Edinburgh Vaults. Edinburgh is a city that's steeped in history, and one of the more fascinating parts of it are the Edinburgh Vaults. Built in 1788 as part of Edinburgh's South Bridge, the vaults are beneath the streets of the city and have been a mysterious place for more than 200 years. The series of chambers were first used as storage and workspaces for the businesses at ground level, but because of their poor construction and damp conditions, they were quickly abandoned. The South Bridge was meant to be something for Edinburgh to be proud of, connecting the old town to the recently established new town. To make the best use of the space below, a series of 120 rooms, vaults, and chambers were constructed into the bridge's arches, creating what was hoped to be a hub of commerce. In the beginning, the businesses moved in like cobblers, blacksmiths, and taverns, but with a lack of waterproofing and poor ventilation, the conditions soon deteriorated. Water seeped down through the stone walls, creating damp, unsanitary environments, and those original tenants had all left by the early 19th century. Homeless people, outcasts, and criminals soon began moving in, which led to an increase in illegal activity. Smuggling, robbery, and gambling became commonplace, as the vaults became a haven for gangs that were well out of reach of the city authorities. More recently, they've also become associated with some paranormal activity. After being eventually abandoned in the 19th century and lost to history for a while, the vaults were rediscovered in the 1980s during an excavation, and it was then that ghostly encounters began. Visitors and guides often hear strange voices, footsteps, and sense an unexplained presence within the chambers, and one of the vault's most famous spirits is known as Mr. Boots, who is said to be a tall, aggressive figure that often chases visitors. Now it's a much-visited tourist attraction, giving people an idea of the darker side of Edinburgh's past. The vaults are known as some of the most haunted places in the whole country, which is said to be a result of the secret horrors that once took place down there. Alright, headed over to Poland with the Wieliczka salt mine. The Wieliczka salt mine, which is near Krakow in Poland, is one of the world's oldest salt mines with a history that dates back over 700 years. It's recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This mine is made up of at least 186 miles or 300 kilometers of underground tunnels and chambers. For centuries, it was a major source of salt, but today it's something different and has become quite strange, and it's a tourist attraction. According to local legend, the mine's patron, St. Kinga, brought salt to Poland when she threw her engagement ring into a salt mine in Hungary, only to find it becoming stuck in the salt deposits at Wieliczka. The mine first began being used in the 13th century as a time when salt was as valuable as gold, and it quickly became one of Europe's leading salt producers. The salt mine was so important to Poland's economy that it was referred to as Poland's white gold. So the Wieliczka mine was treated with great care, and over time it became a source of national pride. Over generations, the miners turned the mine into an underground world of sculptures, chapels, and decorations made entirely out of rock salt. The most famous of these is the Chapel of St. Kinga, which is the cavernous space that was carved entirely by hand from salt rock. The chapel's decorated with salt crystal chandeliers, altars, and statues, including a detailed copy of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. It is one of the largest and most beautiful underground chapels in the world, where Mass is still regularly held and weddings and concerts are hosted. The salt is now mostly gone, so the mine is no longer the valued source that it once was, but it is now a tourist attraction where visitors can see how medieval hand tools were used, as well as later innovations such as wooden winches and pulley systems. The mine's ventilation system down there too, and underground lakes, some of which are used to transport salt by boat, are incredible to see. And there's even an underground health spa down there, which makes use of the mine's natural microclimate. Let's head south to Italy now and the Naples Underground, or Napoli Sotterranea. It's a hidden labyrinth of tunnels and aqueducts that lie beneath one of Italy's oldest cities. With a history that stretches back over 2,400 years, it was originally carved by the ancient Greeks in the 4th century. The tunnels and caverns have since been expanded and repurposed over thousands of years, turning from an ancient aqueduct into bomb shelters, and today as a historical attraction that offers a glimpse into Naples' past. Originally, the Greeks used the extracted tough stone to build the upper city, creating a network of tunnels below as a natural byproduct of that process. This network grew further under Roman rule when the tunnels were transformed into an aqueduct system, which brought fresh water to Naples from distant sources. And as Naples expanded, so did that underground network. It became one of the most intricate and extensive water systems in Europe. The tunnels were actively used for that purpose until the late 19th century, when water contamination concerns led to their abandonment. During World War II, the Naples Underground took on a new role as air raid shelters for the people. The bombings during the war made the tunnels a vital refuge for civilians, and during this time, to accommodate the increasing number of evacuees, many of the chambers were expanded, and things like lighting, seating, and emergency supplies were added. Walking through these spaces today, you can see the remains of this wartime history, including graffiti, bunk beds, and even personal belongings that were left behind by those who once hid there. The Naples Underground has a number of archaeological sites too, with some sections containing remnants of Roman theaters, Greek ruins, and artifacts that show just how important these tunnels came to be. We're gonna fly over to Vietnam now for the Chandi Tunnels. These are an extensive network of underground tunnels that played a critical role during the Vietnam War. Found around 44 miles or 70 kilometers to the northwest of Ho Chi Minh City, the tunnels are more than 155 miles long in all, and were first built in the late 1940s by the Viet Minh. With an extremely clever design, the Chandi Trails are a multi-layered underground system reaching depths of up to 33 feet. Far from being just a way to get around in secret, they provided shelter, strategic opportunities, and living spaces for soldiers. They had kitchens, meeting rooms, storage areas, weapon caches, and even makeshift hospitals, with all these spaces being carefully ventilated and designed to be narrow, which helped defend against foreign soldiers. The entrances to the tunnels were concealed with leaves, sticks, or mud, making them nearly invisible, and the Viet Cong created a series of booby traps within and around the tunnels, such as pits with sharpened bamboo spikes, grenades rigged to tripwires, and explosives linked to pressure plates. Living conditions in the tunnels were pretty harsh. Soldiers faced constant challenges from poor lighting, limited oxygen, cramped spaces, and the threat of flooding during the rainy season. Disease here was a problem too, as the tunnels were often infested with rats, mosquitoes, and other pests. But the Viet Cong endured those conditions, as the tunnels provided safety from aerial bombings and chemical attacks. Today, the Chandi Tunnels have been preserved as a historical site and a powerful reminder of the tactical skill of the Viet Cong during the wars they fought. Let's head to the Middle East, Iran, and Kish. Kish, which is also known as the Kish Kanat, is an ancient underground aqueduct system on Kish Island in Iran. Amazingly, it's over 2,500 years old, and it was originally designed to bring fresh water to the island's residents. Kish Island's known for its dry climate and its lack of natural freshwater sources, and it was the construction of the Karis that made this possible for a community to thrive here. The Kanat system was built using the island's unique coral and limestone geology, and it drew water from underground sources. Kanats were initially developed in ancient Persia and then later spread throughout the Middle East, Central Asia, North Africa. But unlike wells, which only provide access to groundwater at a single location, kanats involve a series of sloping tunnels that are dug into mountainsides or highlands. These tunnels channel the water downhill over long distances, really without the need for pumps or other mechanical devices. Cleverly, the coral rock and limestone filter the water naturally and remove impurities to provide clean drinking water, but they also reinforce the tunnels, making the Kanat system resilient to weather changes and environmental stress. Kish reaches around 5 miles underground, with tunnels running about 52 feet below the surface, and its structure includes several wells and vertical shafts, some of which are over 100 feet deep and are designed to ventilate the tunnels. The Kanat has been partially converted into a cultural center, with sections of the tunnels open for visitors to explore. Inside, you can see some amazingly lit chambers and exhibitions that showcase Persian art, ancient tools, and historical artifacts that show how ahead of their time the builders of this ancient water system truly were. Let's trek over to Canada and the Moosejaw Tunnels in Saskatchewan. They're a network of underground passageways that are steeped in mystery, with stories linking them to everything from bootlegging and organized crime to immigration and labor in the early 20th century. Beneath the small city of Moosejaw, the tunnels have become a unique attraction that reveals a forgotten chapter of Canadian history, and one that's still not fully understood. The origins of Moosejaw tunnels dates back to the late 19th century, when a large number of Chinese immigrants arrived in Canada to work on the Canadian Pacific Railway. Following the completion of the railway, many of the workers were left with few opportunities, and discriminatory policies like the Chinese head tax made things even more difficult for them. As a result, some of those in Moosejaw began to live and work underground and use the tunnels as a refuge from the unwelcome situation above ground. The tunnels allowed them to work in safety and seclusion, taking up jobs in laundries, restaurants, and other small businesses. The tight underground corridors and the hidden rooms became a workplace and a home for them, offering a space where they could live on their own terms. In the 1920s, during the height of Prohibition in Canada and the US, the Moosejaw tunnels would then take on a new role for bootlegging. Alcohol was illegal in both countries, but the closeness of Moosejaw to the US border made it the perfect place for smuggling operations. The tunnel's secretive nature gave rise to stories of famous mobsters, including Al Capone, using Moosejaw as a base for their bootlegging empire, although there's no definitive evidence that Capone himself ever set foot in the tunnels. Today, Moosejaw tunnels have been preserved as a tourist attraction with guided tours that bring the stories of these tunnels to life. The Passage to Fortune tour recreates the difficult conditions that Chinese immigrants endured, showing visitors the cramped conditions and workspaces they had to put up with. While the Chicago Connection tour then delves deeper into the Prohibition-era stories, with reenactments of bootlegging operations and speakeasies. Flying over to Russia, the Moscow Metro 2. It's claimed to be a secret underground transit system that operates alongside the public Moscow Metro. Now, officially, its existence has never been confirmed, but accounts from former Soviet officials, urban explorers, and defectors make it more than likely that such a network does actually exist. It's said to have been built during the Cold War to serve the elite members of Soviet society, high-ranking officials, and military personnel. The rumors of Metro 2 go back to the Stalin era, specifically the late 1940s, when Cold War tensions were at their greatest. Known as D6, the alleged system was built under Stalin's orders and designed to protect the Soviet government in the event of a nuclear attack. The depth and extent of Metro 2's tunnels, if they exist, aren't known, but some claim they run deeper than the public Moscow Metro. And with the Soviet government's focus on security infrastructure, the creation of such a network was completely feasible. Some sources have claimed that it could be up to 31 miles long, going far beyond the borders of Moscow to connect with military bunkers and important locations in the Russian countryside. And among the rumored connections is the Remenki 43, which is a huge bunker system. Another supposed endpoint is Vnukovo 2, which is a secure government airport that could allow for the evacuation by air if necessary. One reason why Metro 2 has become such a talked-about piece of infrastructure is the mystery surrounding the Soviet Union's security infrastructure and the lack of information available to the public. The collapse of the Soviet Union in '91 led to the release of many state secrets, but Metro 2 still remains unconfirmed. Russian government officials consistently deny its existence, and independent attempts to map or locate the tunnels have failed to come up with any conclusive evidence. Let's head south to India and Chandbauri. Chandbauri, which is in the small village of Abaneri in the state of Rajasthan in India, is one of the most intricate step wells in the world. It was built over 1,000 years ago, and it dates back to the 9th century and was commissioned by King Chandra of the Nikumba dynasty. Now, step wells or bauris were mainly designed as water reservoirs in the dry regions of western India, where rainfall was pretty scarce. But among these structures, the Chandbauri stands out above the rest because of its scale and complexity and because of the way it looks. The structure is geometric and symmetrical, and descending 13 stories into the earth, it reaches a depth of about 100 feet, making it one of the deepest step wells there. The well has over 3,500 narrow steps arranged in a precise and symmetrical pattern, forming a labyrinthine effect that draws you into its depths. During the dry months, villagers could go deep into the well to collect the water, while the higher steps were used during the monsoon season when the water levels rose. In ancient India, step wells like this one could also be places of social events, rituals, and places for relaxation, offering a cool retreat in the desert climate. As well as being a vital water source, it was therefore a communal space where villagers could escape the desert heat. It isn't just a practical design, though. It's a great example of the artistic brilliance of the early Indian craftsmen, with each tier of steps and walls being covered with carvings and stone sculptures. One side of the stepwell includes a beautifully formed pavilion and a series of chambers that are believed to have been used for royal purposes. These chambers have elaborately carved pillars and sculptures of Hindu deities, most of which are dedicated to Lord Vishnu, as well as motifs that are typical of Rajasthani architecture. It isn't just a place of legend either, with the belief being that Chandbauri was actually built by spirits in a single night, thanks to how deep, complex, and mysterious it is. Well, this is of course just a myth, and it shows how impressive Chandbauri was seen to those by those who relied on it, and how it became a central part of their community. Heading north to China, Dijiaqing. Dijiaqing, or the Underground City in Beijing, China, is a large network of underground tunnels and bunkers that were built in the 1960s and 70s during the height of the Cold War. They were commissioned by Chairman Mao Zedong, and the city was built as a precautionary measure against potential nuclear attacks or invasion. Covering an area of around 33 square miles, Dijiaqing is believed to be beneath some of Beijing's most famous locations, with entrances supposedly being around Tiananmen Square and other major government sites. While most of the network remains secret, reports suggest that the tunnels were designed to hold up to 300,000 people and contained all the necessary things to survive for a long period of time. There was such a fear that it would be needed for potentially years at a time that spaces were also set aside for schools, movie theaters, factories, and even farms to ensure it could be self-sufficient. For a place that remains such a secret, the scale of this city is unbelievable. Thousands of Beijing citizens, including school children and factory workers, were brought in to dig the tunnels, often by hand, and the project became a massive nationwide effort. With such an extensive network and prime locations, it's likely that this place connected directly with the most high-ranking government buildings, allowing political leaders to move safely and secretly in case of emergency. Ultimately, though, Dijiaqing never saw use as a wartime shelter. As tensions eased and nuclear threats reduced in the 1980s, the underground city was mostly abandoned and fell into disrepair. For a brief time in the early 2000s, parts of it were open to tourists, offering them a glimpse of it for themselves, but safety concerns and structural issues soon led to its closure. Not much is known about the current state of it, and the Chinese government hasn't said anything about future plans for it. There are rumors, though, that parts of it are being renovated and maintained, although this is unlikely the case for the entire facility. Instead, it's likely being kept as an emergency bunker for leaders and possibly a site of operations for secret military projects. Let's head towards France and the Naurus Caves. These caves are a vast and remarkable network of tunnels and rooms located in northern France near the village of Naurus in the Somme Valley. Known as an underground city, this system was first carved out by the Romans as early as the 3rd century and then later expanded in the Middle Ages. It's been in use as a refuge during various points in history, and as over 300 chambers connected by 2 miles of tunnels, they provided a secure shelter for villagers needing protection. Originally, the caves were created as a chalk quarry with soft white stone that was used as building materials across the region. However, as waves of invasions swept across Europe, these tunnels became a safe haven for villagers. From the 9th century onward, as Viking raiders attacked regions throughout northern France, locals adapted the tunnels into secure refuge, adding new chambers to create a fully functioning underground settlement. The tunnels continued to serve this purpose into the Hundred Years' War between France and England in the 14th and 15th centuries, and later during the religious conflicts of the 16th century. The layout of these caves is highly organized and features rooms that are designated for a specific function, such as kitchens, chapels, and stables. Each space within the tunnels was designed for survival, so for example there were wells dug to access water, ventilation shafts for airflow, and even communal areas for religious gatherings and social activities. The caves could hold up to 3,000 people and their livestock, and to further protect people sheltering within, the cave entrances were heavily camouflaged. Today, the caves are a popular historical attraction open to the public, and tours will take you through the rooms and tunnels. Parts of the city have been carefully restored, but perhaps the most surprising thing is how important they've been from Roman times through to modern history. They were used, for example, during the First World War, and you can see evidence of this. Thousands of soldiers, many from Australia and New Zealand, left inscriptions on the walls marking their names, hometowns, and messages. These have turned the caves into an unofficial memorial, as with many of 3,000 of them having been documented, it creates an emotional link between the medieval history of the caves as a refuge and their later use as a bunker for troops. Traveling over to England now, the Smugglers' Tunnels in Cornwall. They're a network of hidden passageways and tunnels that weave through the region's cliffs and coastline. In the 18th and 19th century, Cornwall was a center of smuggling, with its tall cliffs, secluded beaches, and hidden coves, providing ideal cover for illegal activities. Smuggling became an important part of Cornish life as high taxes on imported goods like tea, brandy, tobacco, and silk made legal trade increasingly unprofitable. Coastal communities were often isolated, and fishing families struggled to survive. The high demand for luxury goods in England, combined with the high taxes imposed by the government, created a thriving underground trade. Smugglers could earn huge profits by bringing goods into the country without paying any duties, and Cornwall's landscape provided the perfect conditions. In fact, many of the tunnels led from the beaches directly up to the nearby pubs, inns, and homes where the goods would be sold. The smugglers' tunnels were often crudely built, with stone-lined passages, narrow corridors, and hidden entrances that only locals knew how to access. Many coastal towns in Cornwall, such as Polperro and Penzance, have stories of tunnels that led from the shore to local businesses, where contraband could be stored and distributed. And then the design of them meant they could be used to hide people and goods, which allowed smugglers to hide from the authorities if they needed to. But one of the most famous people linked with Cornwall's smuggling history is John Carter, known as the King of Prussia, who led a gang of smugglers that were based in Prussia Cove. His smuggling ring was surprisingly organized, using tunnels, lookouts, and signal systems to avoid the customs officers who patrolled. Carter and his men became well known for how bold they were, with stories of battles between the smugglers and revenue men becoming part of the local folklore. A few tunnels have been preserved, and guided tours are available in some areas, allowing visitors to explore those passages and learn about the smuggling trade. Alright, we're going to go across the pond to Colorado in the United States for the Cheyenne Mountain complex. It's near Colorado Springs in the United States, and it's a highly secure and advanced military installation that's been built deep inside Cheyenne Mountain. It was originally constructed during the height of the Cold War in the 1960s, and this site was chosen because it would be able to withstand nuclear attacks and serve as a command center for military operations. It is known for housing the North American Aerospace Defense Command. It's a place that's closely linked with overall defense of the country. The complex is around 2,000 feet or 600 meters deep into the mountain, where it's protected by solid granite, and it's further fortified to endure any major attack. The entrance is a massive steel blast door that weighs around 25 tons, and it's capable of sealing off the facility from the outside world. Once inside the facility, it's like a small underground city, complete with its own infrastructure, systems, and contingency measures. As well as NORAD, this complex is also the base of operations for U.S. Northern Command, the Space Force, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. The whole facility was designed to operate independently for up to 30 days in isolation if necessary. Now, to support this, it contains systems that provide essential services such as water supply, power, and waste disposal. Incredibly, the entire installation is shock-mounted on massive springs, each weighing around 1,000 pounds, which are capable of absorbing seismic waves from a potential nuclear blast, something that will preserve equipment and allow operations to continue. It's equipped with radar, satellite surveillance, and communication systems, and it allows the military and defense personnel to monitor potential threats in North American airspace. During the Cold War, the complex's primary mission was to provide early warning of a potential Soviet attack, a role that has evolved in the post-Cold War era to encompass broader ranges of operations. While Cheyenne Mountain Complex remains operational today, many of its original functions were moved to the nearby Peterson Space Force Base in the early 2000s. Because of the high cost of maintaining the facility, there are suspicions, though, that with it being a classified site, there could well be far more that goes on there than what is officially acknowledged. So let's wrap it up. There are many benefits that come from building underground that it's an obvious choice for important structures, from secret transport networks to military bases, water sources, and places of refuge. Communities and nations have benefited from subterranean designs for thousands of years. It can be so secretive, though, that there are probably many more facilities beneath the surface that we have still no idea about. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming years if any more of these places are eventually revealed. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I'll see you next time. Thank you to our channel members.